Okay, do I have pictures here? I think I do. So I can select a picture. Yep. So we finished that little exercise that we did the other day. So we can have pictures. We can maintain our lookup values. We got everything going here that we really wanted. All right, so let's get this up in Azure. Okay, now, in case you haven't done it yet, well, maybe I'll ask, how many people here have actually get their Azure account, their educational account set up? Give me a show of hands. Just click that little button there to raise your hand. Excellent. We have some, a few that just haven't quite got to it yet. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So just to remind you then, the instructions, I put them right back in week 7, right, here on Azure, but they're also right in your homeroom. If you go to your college homeroom in the announcements, okay, they're there as well, right? I'm just going to repeat this because it always comes up. A student emails me and says, "Oh, I'm trying to get it set up and it's asking for a credit card. Do I really have to give a credit card?" No, right? If you see it asking for a credit card, you're in the wrong spot. Use the link that I put up there, and you'll see it even mentions no credit card required. You get $100, and that's actually US dollars, by the way, woohoo, right? Of Azure credit that you can spend however you want. But of course, as I've mentioned before, we don't want to spend any, right? So get your setup and you'll be ready to go. Once you do, okay, you actually access the portal just as portal.azure.com, right? So before you publish, okay, make sure you have your account set up here inside the portal, right? And then back in Visual Studio, make sure you're logged into Visual Studio itself with your same account, the same account you use for Azure, which I'm assuming it should be your college account, right? So as long as that's done, then you're ready to publish, okay? All you have to do is be in the same account. So how do we publish? Well, let me just go through the steps. If I right click here, you'll see publish. It's right there, okay? That's one way to get at it. So I can just say I want to publish this application, right? So there's lots of choices here. No, what we want is it's just, I'm going to host it in Azure, up in Microsoft's cloud, right? It is a Azure App Service. Okay, it's not Linux. It's based on Windows. So make sure you choose that particular app service. Now, I've got 2 subscriptions right up here. So I have one that is called Visual Studio Enterprise, but Azure for Students is the same one that you should see. Now notice that I have a bunch of things up here already that I have up in Azure. By the way, you're limited to 10. So if you already have 10 and you go to publish, you'll actually get a warning saying, no, there's a limit of 10 free subscriptions, right? So, you know, you might have to go in and remove one. Actually, I had to do that earlier on to do this demo. I had to go in and clean out a couple ones I really wasn't using anymore, right? We'll talk about the value of resource groups as I do so. Okay, so Azure for Students. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a new, right? At least the first time you're publishing. We do create new, and then it comes, okay, app service for Windows, right? Notice that it does have the account that I'm creating it under here, and it suggests a name. Now it uses a timestamp here, hours, minutes, days, seconds, milliseconds, whatever, right? So, you know, you could leave it at that, but that's also going to become the web address. So probably don't want all that stuff there. Maybe I'll just call it Medical Office 2023. That's probably a reasonable name for me. My subscription is Azure for Students. Okay, now resource groups. What is a resource group? Well, as the name implies, we can group a whole bunch of resources together. The reason why we would bother with that is you can manipulate, move, delete, I guess all of them, right? An entire resource group at once. So for example, you know, maybe, you know, when you're initially starting out, you want to put it up under a free account, under an educational subscription like this. But then later on, you say, hey, you know what? This is working really well. I'm going to put it out there and actually, you know, ramp up the level of service that it provides and maybe make some money on it, right? So you sign up for a paid subscription so you can, you know, put it up there and you want to move your application over. Well, there's multiple parts involved in the application. So if it's in one resource group, you can just move the whole resource group together at once. Another common scenario, like the one that I just talked about, I had to come in here and clean out a few things. If you have a bunch of things in one resource group, then you can delete them all at the same time very easily just by deleting the resource group, right? So I'm going to make a new group. I'm going to start a new group for this application. So group name, I'll just call it Medical Office 2023. And I like to put the little RG. It doesn't do that for you, okay? But it lets me know as I see the names of the different resources that this is a resource group right in the name. Okay, so it's a new one. It's going to create it. Now, just as important or even more important, we have to choose a hosting plan, right? So I click the little button here to add a new hosting plan. So again, I could probably shorten this down, but again, leave the word plan there. If you want to put an underscore, feel free. Oh, no, not allowed to. Sorry. That's why I didn't have it, I guess. So plan, right? Now, a location. Eastern US, I could do that, okay? Oh, by the way, I'll tell you a funny story. One time, when I was just hurrying for some reason, I don't know how I did it, I was actually creating a separate database server and a web application that used the SQL Server database server, right? I accidentally hosted my database server somewhere in Vietnam, and I hosted my web application, I think it was Eastern US, right? And surprisingly, it worked. So every time the app would run open a connection to the database and execute a query, it was actually connecting to a server down in Vietnam. Yeah, you could actually see performance hit, right? It did actually slow down the performance of the application, but surprisingly, it actually still worked. So obviously, you want to actually have everything usually located together, right? Certainly for the kind of work we're doing here. So let me just find, there should be some choices here. Canada, there we are. Canada Central, Canada East, right? Whichever one of these you pick is up to you. I'm going to go with Canada East today. There we go. Now, very, very important, right? Pretty critical here. What size do you want for your hosting plan? This is where the money comes into play, right? There is a free tier. So as long as you make sure you select free, then you can host this all year long and it won't cost you a penny of that $100 credit you get, which is important because I mentioned before, we want to save that full $100 for later, right? For when you're doing some work in some of the other courses that are coming up for you, right? So make sure you select free. But of course, later on, if you're willing to spend some money and have higher level of performance on your application, then you can go up and up and up here, and you can get an estimate. There's a little estimating tool on how much it's going to cost you, but it can actually cost you tens of dollars, even a day, possibly even hundreds of dollars, right? Certainly in a month to select one of these higher levels. So stick with free. You're going to be good with that. Okay, now I'm ready. Okay, I've got the name, I have the subscription, the resource group is set, and the hosting plan. So I'll just click create. And here's where you'd be warned if you already had 10 services, by the way, and you'd had to go and remove something first before you create a new app service. All right, this shouldn't take too long. Um, has anyone here actually published yet? No problem. Well, you're going to do it when the final instructions are up for the, sorry, pardon, um, part 3, we will be asking you to actually publish it as well. And then you submit a link to your published application. Okay, there we go. All right, so the app service is ready. Now I haven't actually published yet, right? What we've done is we've prepared the service up in the cloud, up in Azure, right? So we've got it all set, so I can just click finish. And that's it. So now we're ready to actually publish, right? Now, before we do though, let me talk about a couple more things you should be aware of. Notice service dependencies, okay? Sometimes it depends on, whether the moon is in the right part of the sky or something. I don't know. Sometimes it'll actually come up here and mention SQL Server because the system still has some dependencies for SQL Server and then you've got the support there for SQL Server in the application. If it does, there'll just be a choice here to say ignore. Okay, there it is there, okay? It's being ignored right now, right? So if it shows up, you can just come in here and the three dots will have the option to say ignore, right? So I am ignoring it already for some reason. I guess maybe because I did this, it's the second time I'm doing this public. Even though I removed the application up in Azure, uh, somehow my Visual Studio has remembered that I ignored it last time. Okay, there we go. All right, so that's one thing. Actually, it doesn't really hurt if it's still there. It won't hurt anything, but you might as well ignore it because we're not using SQL Server at this point. The more important thing here is deployment mode. Now, for years now, I've taught because you had to switch from framework dependent. There are two choices. Framework dependent means that our application is going to be uploaded, but it's going to be dependent on Azure supplying all the frameworks that the application requires, right? Even things like the .NET and all the other Microsoft NuGet packages and so on that are required for the application to run, right? So in the past, every year I would always teach the same thing. You have to click this little edit publish profile button here, and then in the published box, you have to change deployment mode, right? There are two choices: framework dependent, which means we're going to depend on Azure for our frameworks, or self-contained. And I always told students this is something you must do. You must come in here and switch to self-contained, because if you didn't, actually it would come up and tell you, sorry, you'll have to do self-contained because we don't have the frameworks that you're dependent on available, right? But you know what? Earlier on this term, I did a publish and I forgot. Okay, I was just hurrying through and I realized, oops, I forgot to switch to self-contained from framework dependent, and it worked. So I don't know. Maybe they're just realizing that, hey, if we're just using things like an MVC application based on .NET, they're going to make sure the frameworks are available there. So what I'm saying now, as opposed to always switching to self-contained, is try it like this. Try framework dependent first, because if for some reason it can't support your application, if it doesn't have the necessary frameworks supplied that you're dependent on, then it will tell you. And then you just have to go and switch it, right? So why not do this first? Because that way you don't have to upload all those frameworks from your application as a self-contained. All right, that's the only thing we usually have to change in here. Now, if we were working with SQL Server, then often there's changes we might make to the connection strings and so on. But with SQLite, there's nothing else really for us to worry about. Okay, so I'll just click Save, and that's it. So we technically are ready to publish. So I'll click the Publish button. And this typically can take a few minutes. Now here's where, it's checking, it's bundling up the runtime, etc., checking compatibility. And here's where you would get a little pop-up warning you, okay, if a framework dependent deployment mode would not work, right? And you'd have to go in and change that to self-contained. But it looks like it says, I think you're going to pass, you're going to be okay. So this can take a minute or two to actually finish the publication. See, it's adding all this stuff up there. You can see the work it's doing in the output window down below, right? It's reasonably quick and certainly a lot faster doing framework dependent deployment mode rather than self-contained. All right, we see action happening. So this is what it does. After it's finished publishing, it always opens the website. Now remember, okay, we have a .migrate in our initialization file, right? So this is actually going to create the database, seed all the data, okay, in a copy of the database up in Azure. So it's going to take the longest time, the first time here, doing all of that, right? But there it is. Now it's up and running, right? So I can come here to patients, and there they are, right? And I can step through page by page, jump to the last, jump to the first, etc. Right? I can see my doctors, and same thing, everything's working, it looks like. Okay, let's try our lookup values, right? Yep, everything seems fine. I can edit. Oop, let me put that back again. All right, so we are all good. We're fully functioning. And you see this, it's a HTTPS connection, right? And it's live on the internet. So you could go to this URL right now manually if you want to in your browser, and you can try it out as well, right? Now, one thing, because it is in the quote free tier, at the moment. If you haven't accessed the application for a while, right, it goes to sleep. Okay. So the first time somebody goes and accesses it, whether it's through a link or they just type the URL in the address bar, doesn't matter. It will actually take a little bit of a time delay before it actually wakes up and is ready to run. Hey, it's at a free level of hosting, right? We can't expect much more. Um, but once it's up and running, it's pretty quick. Now, let me just talk about the fact that we, seeded all the data and everything right now. We know where that's happening. We're calling our medical office initializer here. So right now, it's calling migrate. Now that it's up to date, it would be faster next time anyway. But you might just think to yourself, well, you know what? I really don't need to worry unless I make another change, okay, to my models or the design of the data DB context at all, right? There's no need to do this migration, okay? So I could comment that out completely from this initialization file and just publish again. And that way, the next time somebody runs the app, it won't bother checking the migration, right? So mind you, we're taking away the system's ability to automatically do the migration, but hey, we're in charge, right? We know whether or not we need it. Just make sure if you do any changes to the design of your system and you're going to republish your application, that you put that back in place, right? But for now, why have it do that? In fact, another thing that a student asked me, and I said, sure, you could also do this, is down in your program. We've already got the data seeded and everything, so you might leave that and just comment this out, right? We've already got the seeding done, the database is created, so I could do that as an alternate approach instead of this. Either one, as far as I'm concerned at this stage, is perfectly fine. Just be aware though that if you do make any changes, okay, then you're going to want to make sure that you actually do the migration up in the cloud as well. Okay, now let's just make it one more change just so we can see that we're actually publishing something else. Maybe I'll just come up here to the home index and I'll just change this. Hi, welcome to the medical office in Azure. Okay. So if I just come back now, if you close publish, I have it right here. Remember, you can just come up, right click and select publish again, right? Now you'll find that it's much quicker publishing after it's done it the first time, right? It doesn't take near as long. Okay, basically it updates the publishing information. Basically it recreates the DLL for the application itself and just sends it up, right? Bada bing, bada boom. So there it is, much, much faster to publish. And then you can just do it as many times as you need. So if you make a little change, you can just publish it and test it out up here, right? And away you go. Okay. Any questions about publishing? Okay. Well, just as a final thing, let me come back to, I think I might have it open here still. No, if I don't, I'll just go to portal.azure.com. So here's my portal. Okay. Uh, One of the things that I'll often do is I come in here, I just go to all resources in the little menu. And that shows me all the resources for all my subscriptions and so on. So I can filter down, okay, uh, by subscriptions and so on and so forth. But let me, I just be able to look here and see Medical Office 2023. There's the app service, okay. There's the plan, right, for it as well. And of course, I can also get to the resource group. So if I wanted to now, okay, maybe I want to demonstrate publishing this one again, I could just come in here and select delete resource group. And that will take everything out that you see listed down here, the actual app service and the app service plan. Now, it's only just two things, but okay, they're all in the one resource group. So, and other things we could do is we could, move it to a different level of service and so on and so forth, right? So anyway, I just want to show you that quickly. Now, let me come back here to the app itself, right? So here it is. Notice there's the default domain, right? So you can actually just click on that link to open up the application. There's lots of information here. Um, there's lots we can do. We'll come back later on and look at configuration and settings for configuration here. One of the things I'll mention right now, if you get an error, right, something would maybe cause one of those error screens that we see from time to time during development where it comes up and shows us, oh, you've got a null reference exception or something like that. I'm not talking about the ones that we produce, but the ones that we aren't catching ourselves and that the system brings up and shows us. Object not set to something or other, right? Well, those won't appear, okay, by default. And it'll say right in the message that does appear on the screen, if you want to see messages about this, go into your application settings and add the environment variable, right? It'll actually show you the variable to do. So you just come in here, add a new application setting, copy and paste it right from the web page into here, and you're done, right? And then it will actually show you the full detailed message. That's one of the things that comes up once in a while. Okay. All right. Well, we'll explore this more as time goes on, but we just wanted to cover basic publishing right now. And, that's basically how you get it up there and get it running. All right. Any other questions about the publish process? Okay.